Good morning and welcome to day 2 of the future of prosthetics and orthotics. I hope those of you who attended yesterday found the sessions to be of interest. The visitor numbers and engagement certainly surpassed our expectations, so we are very happy. We have a packed schedule today. We'll be starting with our keynote speaker, Mark Inglis, followed by our careers panel and a delve into the global perspectives in prosthetics and orthotics. We will have our poster session and voting between 1:15 and 2:15, and finally our closing remarks and award presentation just after 2:30. Our keynote speaker today is Mark Inglis, who will be presenting his work on, he'll be presenting a talk called The Accidental Traveller. Mark Inglis is the first double amputee to reach the summit of Mount Everest, a Paralympic athlete and a founding trustee of the Limbs for All Charitable Trust. Overall, an incredible human being, and we are very humbled to have him here with us speaking today. Thank you, Mark. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning. How is everyone?
We're very good, thank you. Very pleased to have you on board.
Thank you.
There we go. You can see your screen now. Thank you very much.
Cool. We'll just one moment and I'll be with you. It's just saying that I can't start the video because the host has stopped it, but we'll launch into it and we'll see how we go. I'm not sure whether you can see me or just my screen.
We can just see your screen at the moment, Mark.
Okay, if the host could perhaps put me on as well. So thank you. We'll get there in a half sec.
We'll get there, Mark. I think Hope's feverishly working away in the background, making sure that we can get everything up and running. There we go. There you are. Lovely background.
Well, thank you. You might get a hint of where it's at. There we are.
Great stuff. There we go. We've got you now. Thank you.
Well, welcome everyone. Really, for a start, you're talking about the future of prosthetics and orthotics, and what I'd like to do is perhaps just share a different perspective of that, and that's a wee bit of the history, really, because I've lived some of it. But firstly, I want to take you back 50 years, 5 decades. We go back 5 decades, then a young 11-year-old boy arrived at a school in New Zealand, and at that school there was really only one dream for all the boys, one sport for all the boys, and of course, if you know New Zealand, you'll know it's the black jersey, it's rugby. Well, the only problem was that little boy that turned up, that 11-year-old, he was the skinniest little piece of white bait you have ever seen. He crawled out of his first rugby ruck in that first year at school and thought, I need to find a safer sport. He had one of the best things known to man. He had a mentor, and that mentor was Bert, one of his teachers. And Bert was a mountaineer. 5 decades ago, that young boy went home to his mother and said, Mum, I've found a much safer sport than rugby. I'm going to be a mountaineer. And that was the start of the accidental journey. That young boy was me. Well, that journey started with an incredible focus, a focus on the mountains, a focus that meant that my rugby field way back then became the vertical rock and the vertical ice of the Southern Alps of New Zealand. Right up until at the age of 18, when I started as a search and rescue mountaineer at Mount Cook National Park. we're probably New Zealand's first ever professional athletes. Just imagine at the age of 18, it becomes your job, your sport, your culture, all wrapped up into one. And then as an added bonus, we spent most of our time rescuing Aussies, you know, finally found a use for them. Fantastic. Wow. That dangerous sandpit to play in was an incredible place. You know, you could perhaps think of my commute back then as looking a bit like this.
Hauraki, Mount Cook. At 3,754 metres, it towers above the rest of the Southern Alps. First climbed in 1894, it attracts adventurers from around the world, all keen to conquer the many hazardous routes that take them to the top of New Zealand's highest peak. As many as 200 climbers attempt the ascent every year. The majority don't make it. It's unforgiving. 60 climbers have died on its slopes.
That's a pretty good office window, you know, especially from the age of 18. Although that number now is 94. 94 people have lost their lives on the slopes of Aoraki Mount Cook. And it was our job to go out and rescue all of those well, sometimes pick up bodies, a lot of times just pick up people. So if you're going to jump out of a helicopter near the summit of Aoraki Mount Cook, you better know who you're jumping out with. You know, I avoided team sports like the plague when I was young because, wow, you never thought you were doing well enough half the time. And the rest of the time, you never thought your teammates were doing well enough. And so mountaineering, wow, actually, you come to realize you're doing the ultimate team sport. You're actually tied to the other person. If they fall, you might go as well. So if you're going to jump out of that helicopter, if you're going to commit yourself to an environment that's seriously damaged someone, has trapped them, sometimes has killed them, then you better know the person that's on the end of the rope. And it was way back in 1982, on the 16th of November. We had a new team member, Phil. And so Phil and I decided to do the east ridge of Aoraki Mount Cook. It's a beautiful climb. But when you're right up near the summit there, you're on your front points of your crampons, just a few millimeters into the ice. You've got your ice tools bang, bang in. And you can look between your legs straight down 1.5 kilometers. It's a fantastic place. There was just one small hiccup. What we didn't realize was that we were starting our climb on the very first day that all the weather patterns changed in New Zealand. We were starting at the start of an El Nino. We didn't even know what that was. We thought we had 24 hours to do the climb. Plenty of time, up and down. Well, after 12 hours of really tough climbing, we stuck our nose over the summit of Aoraki Mount Cook. We realized that the weather report was 12 hours out. Big storm sweeping across from the Tasman Sea onto that shady side of Aoraki Mount Cook, blowing over 100 kilometers per hour. The storm had hit. We knew enough not to go down the way we'd come up. All we had to do was to go down between the sunlight and the shade there. It's a few hundred meters. It's down a ridge. It's hard blue ice. It's not snow. It's great climbing. But we didn't get very far. We got down to where that shoulder is there, and we were lying flat on our stomachs, and the wind was trying to pick your feet up. You know, that the wind in the New Zealand mountains, just as in the UK, as in anywhere, it's the wind that will kill you. It's the wind that will kill you through hypothermia, or actually just blowing you straight off it. In our case, we were lying flat on our stomachs. The wind was just trying to blow us straight off the mountain. The wind was turning the collar of your jacket into a living, breathing thing that was going to beat you to death. You have to get out of the wind. Well, up there's really only one place, and it's a crevasse. It's always there, changes all the time. Middle Peak Bergstrand. We crawled into that hole. There was a tunnel going in, about that size there. And in the end, there was just a wee space. You could almost sit up, almost lie down, not quite. Sitting sort of in a fetal position, but you're out of the wind. You can survive. You know, and it is New Zealand after all. You know, as we say in New Zealand, just if you don't like the weather, wait 30 minutes and it's going to change. Well, it did. It got worse. After 24 hours, we tried to get out and it beat us back in. We had an assessment of what we had, and what we had were about 5 Shrewsbury biscuits, 5 jam tarts. That was pretty much it. Half a biscuit a day. Well, it doesn't go very far when you're burning 6,000 calories, lying absolutely dead still, because we didn't have a Primus to melt the ice with, to provide water. We had no food. We had no sleeping bag. You just have to lie there dead still. We were climbing light and fast. Well, not so fast. It wasn't 24 hours. We were stuck in that ice cave for over 324 hours, 13 and a half days. 13 and a half days of concentrating every second of what are you doing? What are the decisions that you need to make? The longest anyone's ever really survived in a similar situation is about 9 days. Phil and I lasted 13 and a half because of 2 main reasons. Number one, we had knowledge. That's what you guys are in the business of. You're in the business of knowledge. We had knowledge. We were the people that rescued others. If we couldn't make the right decisions, no one can. And the other thing that we had, well, was total faith in our team. We worried every second of every day that one of our team would get hurt or killed trying to get us. Not the fact that they might not get us. We knew they would. We only had one job, and that was to survive. And surviving up there in Middle Peak Bergstrand, well, it was a wee bit like your own Discovery Channel on survival and frostbite playing at the end of your feet. It was the decision to lie absolutely dead still, to conserve your energy so you didn't die of hypothermia, but knowing that you were sacrificing your feet to frostbite. After 3 days, the big toe does go white and waxy. After 5 days, it's as hard as that. After 5 days, we'd lost a lot of our body weight. In fact, in that 13 and a half days, I went from 71 kilograms to 39. You don't see Weight Watchers or Jenny Craig advertising that diet, do you, eh? Well, it's not the weight loss that kills you, it's the lack of fluids. It's renal failure. But luckily, on the 29th of November, 1982, the weather cleared just for a matter of a few hours. A helicopter, crewed by my own search and rescue team, were able to hover over the hole and pop us out. We closed what we'd called Middle Peak Hotel. We went away to hospital knowing that we would lose toes, knowing that we were up for an amputation, but also knowing in the confidence of youth that, you know, chop them off, we'll be back climbing by Christmas, no problem. Just need to get some smaller boots. Well, there was a problem. And the problem was the freeze-thaw cycles that our feet had gone through meant that we had significant amount of gas gangrene. And so after a few weeks in hospital, those were our feet. I'm pretty privileged these days. And well, I used to say before COVID, I traveled the world, but I still do virtually. But I work with companies all around the world on change, on the understanding of change, of the attitude to change, the culture of change. And I'm really lucky because I have a gold standard for change. I even know the time. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. on Christmas Eve, 1982. That's when the surgeons came in, put 2 lines right there. In 1982, in New Zealand, no matter what happened to your lower limb, you got cut off at 5.5 inches, at 140 millimeters, because it was, well, it's actually your fault. It was a nice, neat length to build a socket to. Well, actually, we could have done with a bit more than that, but that's what we had. All I could think as they're wheeling you into theatre was cut those things off and let me out of here, because they were killing me. The only problem is you wake up the next day on Christmas Day and you look down the bed and those sheets end halfway down. These are the stories that you will live in your careers with so many other of your clients, so many other people that you're helping. And that's when you realize that you never quite know what something is like until it's actually happened to you. And then when you have to rewind and start to think again. And that's what the challenge was. The challenge wasn't really around on what to think. I believe the challenge is how to think. And so for me, it's the understanding that that's not a double amputee mountaineer. Hopefully you see what I see. And what I see is a mountaineer that will never have to worry about frostbite in his feet again, eh? You know, one less thing to worry about. I don't have to buy boots, you know, I get to make legs. That's not a double amputee skier. That's a skier that when he breaks a leg, he doesn't have to worry about that. You know, I just have to swap a bolt out. It takes me 10 minutes. It's how we think. So much of the future of prosthetics and orthotics is around the technical advances that you shepherd through. But equally importantly, is shepherding through the attitude that you have, the attitudes that you can share with so many of the people that are your clients. For me, it's always been about challenging what I call the normal. I love my bike. You know, before I lost my legs, we had some of the first mountain bikes in New Zealand. I looked around the world and I found Paralympic cycling. This is in the mid-90s. And I had a look at the leagues that they were using. And everyone was excited about carbon fiber. But in almost every case, it was just a straight pylon. It was a peg leg. You know, I'm not a pirate. I didn't want to be a pirate. That's not how you ride a bike. And so with an engineer in Christchurch, Wayne Alexander, Cowboy and I, we re-envisaged what it should be for a leg on the bike from an engineer's perspective and from a rider's perspective. It's about having the toe down at 12 degrees. It's having an offset ankle. It's having the power coming from your knee down through the spindle of the axle. It's about having the movement of the pedal. So as you come across the top of the slope and as you drive down, the pedal's in the right angle for you to drive down. But it's no use designing this stuff. The flex feet that I'm wearing, any of the legs that I've used, the car that I drive, the car that you drive, your motorbike, everything, it has to be tested. And the best place to test a set of legs, well, it was another journey, and it was a journey of becoming good enough and to being selected for Sydney in 2000 in the road race, and more importantly, for the kilo on the track. I took those legs to Sydney and I used them.
Now you see a double amputee with no cycling experience as a track road cyclist until taking up the sport after the mountaineering accident. You may remember he spent 13 days in a snow cave in the Southern Alps, but now look at him go. A brilliant beginning by Mark Inglis. He comes up with the time to be at that stage. He's underneath, he's going well. He's in the lead and he's going well. Can he someone else lead it? Mark Inglis of New Zealand goes into the lead. 123.169. A brilliant ride. He really is an inspiration.
123.169. 0.2 seconds too slow for the gold. I did bring back New Zealand's first ever medal in cycling at the Paralympics. It's this, yep. It's a piece of BHP silver. I carry it with me everywhere because it's a reminder. It's a reminder of that 0.2 of a second that Radovan Kaufman beat me by. It's a reminder of how hard I rode. It's a reminder of the sacrifices my family made. But really, most importantly, it's a reminder of the view that I saw from standing on that podium and looking out. It's a view that I saw wasn't the crowd, it was in my mind's eye. It was that, the summit of Aoraki Mount Cook. I tried climbing lots of times beforehand, but really hadn't understood the amount of focus and effort that I would need to put in. That's what the Paralympics taught me. I came home, I trained for a year, and I took a few more steps.
Every time you put the X in, you just think, oh, yes, absolutely. You have to do something regularly in your life to set new parameters. I think I'll come out with something stronger and with far less inhibitions for doing more things, I think.
In his second attempt in 2001, 19 years after that rescue from the ice cave, Mark Inglis was back on top.
And that's exactly what every one of your clients needs to have. That's what you need to have in them, and that's faith. Faith in yourself, faith that you can do it. That's what I had. That's what the Paralympics gave me. And standing on top of Aoraki Mount Cook, in my mind's eye, I only had one view as well. And as you can probably guess, it was that. When I had my legs cut off on Christmas Eve of 1982, everyone told me that I would lose my dream of Everest. Well, standing on top of Aoraki Mount Cook, I got my dream back. Why Everest? Well, I try to explain it. For a mountaineer who's lived his whole life mountaineering, it's like the Climbers World Cup. It's the game that you have to be at. It's the one game that you want to win. It won't be the hardest game you ever play. You'll do harder climbs. You'll do more important climbs in your life, but it's the one game you have to do. I came home from Aoraki Mount Cook and I put the plan in place. 2002 and 2004, I climbed Choyu, the 6th highest in the world, 8,201 meters. And then in March of 2006, I was at base camp, ready to go.
The climbers have spent a week preparing and are ready to roll. But for one, the challenge is unique. Mark Inglis has a handicap that would stop most people from climbing a flight of stairs. Nevertheless, he intends to be the first man to summit Everest without legs. He's losing his voice in the thin air, but his new carbon fiber legs are working well.
I'll whip the moss, try the stump saws. Huge advantage to be able to do this partway through the day. Huge advantage. It's working pretty damn well.
Well, I mean, they worked well, but you can see how basic they were. It's I still use PTBs to this day. I've just tried a new set of direct sockets. I've tried various TSBs, but for a short stump double amputee to climb, to do the technical work that I do off-road, when I'm not presenting and interpreting change to people, I build mountain bike trails. I'm the manager of one of the great rides here in New Zealand. I'm out there with wheelbarrows and grubbers on mountain bikes, on motorbikes, driving diggers, doing everything. And for me to do that as a short stump double amputee, then the only way that I've found I can keep my balance well enough is really with a really good fitting set of PTBs. bloody hard to find these days. But, you know, back then, just to ensure that they stayed on, you saw, you know, both using sleeves and a cuff. Flex feet on the bottom, they'll do 99% of everything. And that is where the planning becomes real, you know. That's where I have to explain to most people, which I don't need to you, that only, you know, the piece of carbon fiber at the bottom is only 5% of what I do. 95% of what I do is in your hands. Is how that socket fits. And the obligation to me is to explain that to you. And that's the challenge. It's the combination of your artistry, your skill, your science, and it's my ability to understand that also. I always say, you know, I've done a 39-year apprenticeship so far in prosthetics, and I'm still working, still learning. Well, the one thing you understand on Everest is everything is around collaboration, and it's about communication. Exactly as I've just explained to you. That for me is how leg fit is. That's how a new leg is. The most amazing thing that I can have in my life is a new set of legs. The most disappointing thing I can have in my life is a new set of legs. And it's that combination of the two that really has challenges. Everest isn't about being a double amputee. Everest is about being a good mountaineer. I was on a team that wasn't there for me. I was just a member of a team. And as such, you need to be able to communicate, to understand. Competition on Everest kills people. Collaboration within a team and between teams is the only way to really succeed. It really is survival. Up high on Everest, well, to get there, you might have seen in that first piece of video what I call my Terminator legs. That's what happens when you let an engineer help design your legs. They had 4 pivots, 5 springs, constantly braking. They made me walk like Arnie in Terminator 1, not even in Terminator 2 or Terminator 3. And they didn't climb that well. I climbed Aoraki Mount Cook in spite of the legs, not because of them. And so we really needed to have to do something else. And we went back to first principles. And the first principle that you have is that, well, actually, what you need to do is you need to have a rigid forefoot. When you're standing on those front points of your crampons, you don't want ankles flexing. You want absolutely rigid. And those are the legs that we climbed Choyu with. You know, those legs probably cost me 20 or 30 bucks to build. It's a piece of T-shaped alloy, an alloy pole, and some purloined pyramid adapters. It's the toe and the heel off a ski mountaineering boot and just a standard crampon. No use for Everest though. You know, you guys understand materials, so I shouldn't need to explain to you the problem. And the problem is metal fatigue and the cold. And so the only leg that's really going to work well on high on Everest is actually carbon. Again, absolutely rigid in the forefoot. We put a bit of spring in the heel to try and help with downhills. In reality, it really didn't help much. And as you can see, the mounting on the leg there, I'm pretty sure you should know what that's for. Just in case you don't, it's for a bike light. It's for a cycle light. And so instead of having to worry about headlamps and things and always looking down at my feet to see where I'm putting my foot, I mounted cycle lights on both legs. So in fact, when I was coming towards you, I looked like a train with the 2 lights at the bottom and the 1 light at the top. But it's about making the most of the advantages that you've got, because you need them up high. Above 8,000 meters, they call it the death zone. Above 8,000 meters, I don't. I call it must-do zone. It doesn't matter whether you're a double amputee or not. Up here, it's tough. 8,000 meters is around about there. I climbed Everest from the north. We call it the mountaineers side. It's steeper, colder, windier, rockier, more difficult. If you can't walk, you can't be rescued. But there are no avalanches, there are no ice falls to wind your way through, and there's not the other 80% of climbers that are trying to climb the mountain annoying you. Right down the bottom, about 20k down the valley is base camp, 3 weeks there, going up and down. It's all about that combination of getting your hematocrit up to around about 0.6, 0.62, so you can make use of what little oxygen there is. Plus, get your body used to that low pressure. It's that low pressure that's the killer up there. You know, you can suck enough oxygen in quite often, but it's that combination of the low pressure, the hypoxia. That's what you need to train for. You're on the mountain for a good 5 or 6 weeks from base camp, ABC. And once you think that you've trained enough, then Everest becomes a 5-day climb. No mucking around, no stopping, no resting. Camp 1, Camp 2, Camp 3 just below the death zone, the must-do zone, 7,900 meters. Your last few hours in a tent will be at Camp 4 at 8,300 meters. And then the next, from the early hours of the next morning on up to the summit. It's a tough place. On the north side, the real crux of the climb is the what we call the second step, that large ship-like prow that's right in the center of the image there. And there, wow, and there's a 3-foot overhang, a 3-meter overhang, sorry, it's 3 moves, 4 moves, 8,600 meters, minus 50. You can't stop because you can't wear enough clothes at minus 50 and still climb. You have to keep moving. Then there's the 1975 ladder that was put in there by the Chinese. Gee, the climber that did it in 1975, I know him. We've communicated, and as you may know, he became the second climber, double amputee, in 2018 to climb Everest. Because he's a double amputee, because he took his boots off to climb that crap. Instant frostbite. If you can get above that second step, Everest is yours if you're tough enough. But by the same token, Everest is a place where you can take your life as well. I stood on top of that second step and took a few more steps. Tell you what, coming back down, when you look down it, it's a scary place.
90 minutes ahead, Mark Inglis conquers the last difficult traverse before the summit.
So this is the 50 meters up the roof of the world. You take a few steps and you stop and you try and suck some air and you take a few more steps.
After climbing on prosthetic legs for 47 days, Mark Inglis has made the summit of Everest. He's now the first man without legs to reach the top of the world.
Oh, and the first thing that people ask is, what's the view like? And I'm going, I don't know. It was like I touched the top and got out of there. You know, I spent about 12 minutes on the summit. But the one thing you need to understand is that almost 80% of deaths on Everest happen on the way down. And the biggest challenge for me wasn't climbing Everest. The hardest thing I have done in my life isn't going up Everest. That was a dream. The hardest thing I've ever done in my life was coming down Everest. The top is just halfway, and the journey down, that was tough.
Mark Inglis has struggled past them on his way down from the summit, and his artificial legs are now causing him agonizing pain. Despite his stumps being rubbed raw, Mark must keep walking because a rescue this high up is impossible.
Now, for you sharp-eyed professionals, that was not blood on the snow between my legs. That was my raspberry energy gel that dripped to there. So there wasn't so much in the way of blood because it was frozen. What happened on summit day is that I lost about 8 kgs of body weight. My stumps had shrunk. I had all my kit that I carry with me everywhere. You know, I'm taking my legs off several times a day and packing them out. I have my little leather packers so they stay tight and hard and firm, so I've got accuracy of foot placement all day. Well, at -50, you can't do that. On the summit ridge of Everest, you can't do that. Imagine dropping your leg on the summit ridge of Everest. You know, boing, boing, boing. That's a problem. And so what happened is my stump shrunk so much that on that brutal downhill, I ended up popping the bones through the ends of my stumps. Luckily, there is 0800 yak. And so down low on the mountain, I rode a yak down, but it was tough. You know, it's a dangerous sandpit that we play in. The hardest 10 days of my life have been from the summit of Everest back to New Zealand. I had my legs on the whole way. They wouldn't let me on the plane unless I could walk onto the plane. Walk on I did, with a bit of help from several of these. Nurofen just doesn't cut the mustard sometimes. About 60% of people came off Everest in 2006 with some form of frostbite, and I was no exception. For me, it was the hands. At -50, I need to use my hands irrespective, so I need to wear gloves, not mittens. And my hands got pretty cold. That's what they were like when I got back to New Zealand. And a few days later, well, that's what they were like. That for me is the cost of Everest. You know, you don't actually need a little finger. There's no business there for you guys. I don't need a prosthetic. Those ones there, the only problem I have with that hand is that it's really hard to truly immerse yourself in road rage, because, you know, that's not going to offend anyone, is it? So it's like you make the most of what you've got, and that's what I've got. Was climbing Everest worth the loss of fingers? Oh yeah. I had my legs off when I was 23. To have a bit of a trim up of a few fingers, well, that's nothing really. The one thing I do know though is that disability should never define your life. And it does so for so many people. It does so for people that you will be dealing with your whole careers. And you are helping, I guess, put opportunity back in that life, but not everyone has that. This is Tile. He's a Tibetan Sherpa. Well, actually, it's probably better that Tile tells his story.
Before leaving base camp, Mark has some unfinished business.
Very nice to see you. See you again.
On a previous training climb in the Himalayas, Mark met Tile.
Tile and I are about the same age. We lost our legs in the same way. We both lost them through frostbite 20 odd years ago. The difference is that he's been walking around on his knees for 20 years.
As his old friend smiles in disbelief, Mark fits him up with a second chance.
This is one strong man. If anyone can do it, yeah, I think it's Tile here can do it.
So that's the first time he stood up. 20 years.
That is a very tall man.
That's our fitting room at 5,300 meters.
It's coming around pretty quick, huh?
Yeah, he's going very well. Stand up straight. Yeah, that's it.
That's great.
Whoa!
Look at the smile on his face. It's worth $1 million.
This is the best high altitude physical therapy I've ever seen. It's fantastic.
Yeah, Tilly. Oh, he's happy. Oh, very happy. It's good to see some love.
He hasn't walked for 20 years. This must be like, a miracle for him.
Oh, it's been probably one of the best days of my life, really. I've always professed that one of the most important things you can do in life is to do some good for someone else. And today it's sort of tangible, really. So it's pretty neat, yeah.
It's more than pretty neat. You know, I envy you that you can do that every day. I envy you that you give people opportunity in life. It was $1 million smile, but they were legs that cost me a couple $100. You might have recognized the sockets. I'd met Tele in 2004. I couldn't take casts, but I could take measurements. I know how to measure a stump. And lo and behold, his stumps were almost identical to mine. And so it was a matter of just retrofitting a set of my sockets. He walked out of that base camp 3 days later. I still need to get my shoes back. He can't use them every day. He's still in Tibet and it's very difficult to get there. He uses them like his Sunday best, but at least he's using them. What a lesson that was for us. I'd raised about 70,000 New Zealand dollars when I was on US dollars. A lot of that was used to create Limbs for All and our big major project that we did in rebuilding one of the limb centres for the Cambodia Trust at Kampong Shanang. Limbs for All really is just about giving people the opportunity to be the best. We work a lot in Nepal where I take treks back. Tell you what, 21 days trekking for me is harder than Everest. The stumps, the sockets have to be so much better. At the moment, the set I'm walking on, it's not going to do it. I need to work on these sockets. So in November 2022, we'll take another group of clients for the experience that's there. In Nepal, we work on two things. One is we work with the SIRC, the Spinal Injury Rehab Centre, and we provide these rough terrain wheelchairs. We wholly fund some, partly fund others. In total, 250 chairs, I believe. We also work with Amit and Amarita at Limb Care Nepal. We've rebuilt a lot of their workshop, and I see they've just moved sites again as well, because it's pretty easy to find people to give you money for legs. As you will know, or you'll learn, it's pretty hard to get people to give you money to make a safe place to make thousands of legs. And that's what we are trying to do. We upgraded the fitting room, treadmills, 3D video, everything. You know, some of the kit that they've got in Limb Care Nepal is better than we've got in Christchurch. And you just see it on the ground. You see one of these old Jaipur foots, you know, an old exoskeleton leg. Then you see the new leg. You know, it's a damn fine leg that's been made by Amit and Amarita. But even more importantly, you see the smile on her face. And again, that's the thing that you're doing. That's the future of prosthetics and orthotics. It's her getting up and going out and making a living and working. Since 2003, I've been working with the Cambodia Trust, which is now Exceed. And I'm very pleased to see Cicely there presenting this afternoon. What great partners that they have been. And it's a really connecting for the future. We rebuilt that limb centre in Kampong Shanang. And then we have just started a new program. We're in our third year coming up, called Limbs for All Kids Exceed. It's almost 40,000 US dollars. It'll go well over that actually. And it's about giving opportunities to kids to get to school. I think we've got 115 kids in our program at the moment, funding their ability to get to school, their support at school, their support at home, whatever they need, be it limbs or chairs or whatever, and bikes to get there, or even now, of course, the electric bikes as well. So people ask who inspires me, and I always go, it's the Hillarys, the Shackletons, the Gandhis, but it's also the people that just get on with life. That I think was at one of my first visits to the Kampong Shanang. I was there when he got his legs. You know, the first thing he did with his legs was lay into that soccer ball. If he can do that, we can do anything. Shreyang up in Battambang, no arms, no legs, tetramelia. You know, if she can be carted around in a shopping basket, but still have a smile like that, She's finished high school and is starting on a career, and she has a life. She has some opportunity, I hope. And then this chap, really high transfemoral bilateral amputee. This is a Cochin down in Kerala in India. I thought he was a beggar. And so I brought him some food, and I was about to give him some food, and he started chatting away. And he even had a bit of a Kiwi accent. And what I discovered was that he was a railway worker, so you can guess what happened to him. But more importantly, he has no ACC, no accident compensation, no social welfare, no insurance, no job. But he's created a whole living because he's got a knack for languages. And so he knows he'll never have legs. You know, he's got such a high transfemoral amputation. Doesn't want a wheelchair because somebody will steal it. So what he does is he spends his time down there and interprets it. He's learned all of the major Asian languages, all of the major European languages, a fountain of knowledge. If he can do that, we can do anything. Just before I do my last 2 slides, I thought it'd be a good opportunity now, perhaps Sean, Jen, and others, if you've got questions, fire them on through to me, and I'll see what I can do. I think we've got probably a few minutes for questions, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, thank you so much for your talk. That was absolutely stunning. The things you've done are just beyond belief. Beyond belief. We have had a few questions come through, if I'm right to share those with you.
Yes, please.
Okay. So Ben has asked, how much did your attitude towards your amputation pre-op contribute to your recovery?
100%, except for the foot trip that happens when you have the amputation. So the most powerful thing you can have is well, to take it back another step. The best person to ever have their legs cut off when they're 23 years old is a young mountaineer, because you really can just approach it like another mountain, approach it like another climb, and it's something that needs to be dealt with. And it's that pragmatic advice that you can give people. The best advice I think I ever had was a registrar, and Sally came in. She stood at the end of and she wasn't an orthopod. She was a plastic surgeon. She stood at the end of the bed and she said, "You know that this isn't going to take you months. This is going to take you years to recover from." She said, "You have to be in there for the long haul. But whenever things start to get tough, always remember to look over your shoulder and see how far you've come. Because we're always in too much of a hurry to get to where we're going. We forgot about the amazing journey that we've had." Pre-op is just so important, but then so is managing after you get your brain back, because nearly always these days it's much better with the new anesthetics. But in 1982, they were pretty brutal. They steal your brain. And it's not until you get your brain back that you can actually put conscious thought in. I'm not sure whether it was a conscious thing, but they always try and send someone in to speak to you who's worse off than you. And so they sent this old chap in who was one transfemoral, one BK, in to see me. You know, and he was so excited because he could still climb a ladder. And I was going, "Geez, mate, I'm going to climb more than a ladder." And so I'm not quite sure whether they did that to spur us on. But anything that you can do pre-op just pays huge dividends, because you start off with an attitude that's at a much higher level than otherwise.
Fantastic, thank you very much. We have another question, and it's from Rona. And Rona asks, do you feel there has been a change in how the public perceives the ability of people with limb loss in terms of, for example, the 1980s compared to now?
Oh, very much so. And it's the change that's been driven partly by Paralympics, but it's also the change that's been driven by so many of us that now have thrown away the cosmetic covers of our legs. You know, these days we've got the endoskeleton legs. When 39 years ago, you know, I had the exoskeleton carbon fiberglass leg that was coloured to look like your skin. and it was pretty pasty, the person that colored it should have gone out in the sun a bit more. It was, I started painting mine black with a silver fern on because I didn't like the color, and this was well over 30 years ago. Then when we got the endoskeleton legs, I was always scuffing the cosmetic cover. So I just cut it off one day and threw it away. And it's to have that confidence in yourself that you don't care that people can see that you're an amputee. And that's one of the really important things. And for other people to respect you, you have to respect yourself. And so it's not about trying to hide yourself away. It's about being confident in who you are. I explain to people, I wear shorts because I'm taking my legs off 3 or 4 or 5 times a day to add wee patches to my Bocklite liner, or to give my stumps a bit of a moment before I jam them back in again. And so I wear shorts so I don't have to drop my strides in the main street, And so it's a really pragmatic thing I do, but I also understand that it's how people see me. And it took some industrial psychology when I was a full-time winemaker for 15 years. So I was the senior winemaker at Montana Wines here in New Zealand for many years. It was after a career as a scientist before that. And we had to change the company around. The company was losing money. It was the biggest wine company, making millions and millions of litres, but not making any dollars. We changed it around by making it a collaborative company. But to do that, every individual has to have faith in their communication with everyone else in their team. And to do that, you need to be able to stand outside of yourself. You need to be able to look back in and see the person that other people see. And if you can do that, and it's a real skill that has to be learned, then it's fantastic because you can interpret other people's compliments and their criticisms. And that's allowed me to keep my foot on the accelerator because so many people don't understand what an amputee is capable of. And so we have to go out and show them, and we can't be derailed by the well-meaning but patronizing compliments from others. And so, I do much better if people go, "Oh, you only did that." It's like it's about understanding that I have to keep my foot. I don't know how much a double amputee can ever do, and so how can anyone else? So yes, things have changed dramatically over the last 30 years, but by the same token, that change has had to come from the amputees as well as from the community.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Empowerment is incredibly important, isn't it? I have another question for you, and just so you're aware that the Centre for Doctoral Training that we're part of, it has a background. A lot of people are engineers that come into it. So watching today, we've got a healthy mix of clinicians, engineers, postgrad researchers, that kind of thing. And in your talk, you spoke of how engineers can overcomplicate design. So what advice from you, as an end user, can you give to avoid making that kind of mistake to make them maybe more useful for yourself?
Well, I mean, the trouble is we don't know what we don't know. So I've had to learn so much. Cowboy, the engineer that made my Terminator legs, we all bought into the idea of those legs. They were fantastic. I slapped them on and ran on them the first time I got them, and broke them, But it was the understanding that Wayne had to understand exactly what I needed a leg to do. And that was the thing that came where our rigid 4-foot leg came out. That's where our cycling leg came out. Those 3mm carbon Kevlar blades. Anyone with legs will beat me going up a hill. I'm 17% down in power compared to a leg version of myself. But I guarantee you won't beat me going down, especially not at the moment where I'm about 10 kgs overweight, because those legs can be more aerodynamic than having a fat calf muscle hanging out in the wind. And so it was the understanding of where are my advantages and how can we build that into a leg, but what does that leg need to do? And so in climbing, the leg really only needs to do one thing, and that's in steep technical climbing. And so it's that rigidity, that the absolute minimum of weight while still not breaking. And I did break one of my legs on Everest that I had to fix. but luckily Wayne was along with me. So it's the responsibility of the amputee to explain what the leg really needs to do, but it's also the responsibility of the engineer to understand what are they really trying to solve here, and is it a leg that's going to do 99% of everything, which my ProFlex are doing every day, or is it that 1% which my ski leg, my mountain bike leg, my road bike legs, my rock climbing legs, my gardening legs, my chainsaw legs. I got legs for everything, and it's that. And it's also the understanding of simple things, like the simplest bit of technology that I've used was to get Wayne to cut the legs shorter, and I do it myself. I have about 4 or 5 different lengths pylons, because I'm standing up here in a hotel room in Dunedin on my going to town legs, but when I get home and I get the chainsaw out, or I'm out on the trails, I'm down about here. It's like stepping into 4-wheel drive. And so it's explaining everything to the engineers. And so, yeah, it's pretty easy to get carried away and excited, and they need to do all of that because that's where advances come from. But sometimes we just have to go back to first principles.
So along that same kind of line, you've spent a lot of time in kind of like lower middle income countries. We've seen you helping a relatively new user don some prosthesis. So there's so much transformation in the technology that's being applied to the science of prosthetics. How do you see that being reflected in lower middle income countries, your own experiences? What advice would you give to an aspiring prosthetist who would like to make a difference in that kind of environment?
Every amputee wants the silver bullet. Every amputee wants the latest and the greatest. It's taken me 39 years of being an amputee to understand that a PTB really is as good as it gets for me. And a TSB, a direct socket, a symphony, whatever, just don't work, and they work beautifully on wandering down a city street, but not where I need to be. And so you have to put that into the mix. And so in our in low and middle socioeconomic environments, those amputees still desire to have the absolute best. And trying to sell the idea that they're not getting the best to them is a really hard sell. And so it's about selling the most appropriate leg to people. And so that's as much of a challenge in our affluent environments as well. I see people out there on legs that aren't using them to anywhere near the extent that they need to be. I also see people saying to me, oh, if I had legs like yours, I'd be able to do that. And I'm going, well, actually, my legs are a lot more basic than yours. It's about the application of self to the problem, really. And so in low and socioeconomic conditions, you need to be able to give people the best possible legs you can, but it's also managing people's expectations. And, that leg that Amrita and Amit made for that young lady in Kathmandu, it's allowed her to effectively work and bring her family up, whereas that old exoskeleton with a Jaipur foot, it was a shocker. It was like a piece of drain pipe, but she was still working away at it. And you just see the smile on the face. So you do the best you can, with 3D printing technologies. I've seen it operating at Limcare, Nepal for the hand parts for the Vancouver project, things like that. Those are all things that are opening the door really to everyone. One of the things that really important not to do is to open a door so wide and show people everything that they can have and then slam the door and not give it to them. So if you're going to do something, you have to commit to it, and you have to commit to it for quite some time. So it's you've got a bigger challenge than I do. Yeah.
Thank you so much for answering our questions, Mark. We've got a whole host of very positive comments on the website thanking you for your contribution. So really, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jen. I'd just like to share just a couple of words at the end, really, and the ones that I hope will resonate with everyone, really. And it's that those words from T.S. Eliot. They are just so applicable to not just to the prosthetists and orthopods, but to the amputees as well. And it's only those who risk going too far can possibly find out how far one can go. We have to encourage every one of our amputees to do that. I know you are all inspired to do it as well. But the thing I also know from being a mountaineer is that the peaks that I climb are earned, they're not gifted. And so to walk on a great set of legs isn't a gift, it's something that's earned. It's earned by the amputees gaining as much knowledge as possible so they can interpret what they're feeling to you and you to be able to explain it to them as well. The one thing that I knew when I stood on the roof of the world and watched the sun come up, I know I can do even more. But the one thing I know is I'll never be the equal of an able-bodied mountaineer because I don't have legs. I know that. But I can be the equal of any mountain I choose. You're entering a profession that has mountains, people that have mountains in front of them every day of their lives, and you'll have your own as well. And I guess I encourage every and each and one of you, in fact, I challenge you not to be the equal of the mountains in your lives, but be even greater than them. Carry on the great work. It gives us the ability to do so much more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. What a wonderful note to end on. Thank you very much. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Ciao.
Thank you. That leads us into our next 15-minute break, which will be followed by a session on a session run by my colleague Sean on a careers panel. So we'll be back at 10:15 with a live stream of the careers panel. Thank you again very much, Mark.